Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and we've got a full squad today for the Dundee United clash at Tannadice. We have Anthony Haggerty, Laura Bradburn and JP Mason. Welcome back to the Matchday Bulletin, guys. How are you?
Hello.
Not too bad, thanks.
Laura, you'll be back tomorrow. Tell us all about what's happening tomorrow on the 12:30 Bulletin.
Yeah, you'll be sick of my face after Friday and then today and then Monday, but Natasha has quite rightly spearheaded a wee takeover of AXOM for Monday. We're celebrating International Women's Day, so what better way to do that than to get the three current female contributors on the show. I'm sure everybody watching will know that we're all very shy and retiring, so I don't know how we're going to fill an hour of content, but we'll do our best.
I think you'll be alright. Tony wrote a song especially for the occasion. I don't know if he's going to premiere it on today's show, but we've got plenty to talk about. Tony, I don't know, you want to hold that one just now, or you can use it at a later date?
We'll see how the game goes. We might need cheered up at full time.
I said I would leave that to AXOM's version of Destiny's Child to sing it themselves, you know.
See, one of the big things on A Celtic State of Mind, and I remember putting the whole podcast together back in the early days, and one of my key objectives was for it not to be one of these sites that focuses on things away from Celtic Park, unless they directly affect Celtic, of course. So we don't really talk about Rangers and all that kind of stuff. We know the magnitude of this season. We know what's happened yesterday. We will touch on it, but before we do all that, let's talk about Celtic. We're going to have a look at the team lineups, but a wee update on Friday. The Celtic media team invited A Celtic State of Mind into, I don't think we can call it a press conference, it was more of a alternative media conference, a fans media conference, and A Celtic State of Mind were invited along with some of the other names that you'll be aware of. People like Celtic Underground were there, the 20-minute Tims, the Cynic, 4 Tims in a Pod, and various others were all invited, and it was really well set up, and we had the opportunity to ask one question each of David Turnbull and John Kennedy. So you don't know what order you're in, so you could be number 8 in the list, so you had to have maybe 10 or a dozen questions just in case everybody else asked the questions that you had lined up. But what we've done is we've got a couple of video clips to play. We'll start off with David Turnbull. Good afternoon, David. John Dykes from A Celtic State of Mind here, and I was just looking at Scott Brown. He soon turns 36. How big an influence has Scott been on you since you joined Celtic, and how important will he be in influencing any new rebuild at Celtic Park?
Yeah, he's been brilliant since the day I've come in. Even when I wasn't playing, he was kind of involving me in everything and just kind of having banter with me and stuff. He's been great to have around on the pitch and off it, and kind of looking as a rebuild, you said. I'm sure he'd say he's probably still got plenty left in his legs, so it's kind of down to him. That's not really for me to say.
David Turnbull, a man of few words, I would say. He does seem to go up in front of the press from time to time, Tony. What did you make of his comments about Bruni? I get the impression it would be a good idea, and I think I've spoken to JP about this, to keep Scott Brown for at least another season as a player.
First and foremost, you look like that old Ricky Fulton advert where he finished with the line, and I dropped my carry out in the flare.
Somebody on Twitter said he looked like a home and away villain, a home and away bad boy.
That's nail on the head, by the way. Nail on the head.
The old advert, I think, the old Scottish carry out shop. No.
Who were the home and away villains? Who were the bad boys you remember? I mean, my era was Shane Parrish. Remember Shane Parrish was a bit of a bad boy. I could see him wearing a sleeveless Adidas top.
There's a guy called Skinner. I think it might have been Neighbours though, but it was a Skinner who was a baddie.
You're right, Toadfish was Neighbours as well. Anyway, let's move on from that. Tony, sorry.
The Joe Mango no fancy sells a bad boy, but
Joe Mango, aye.
But he will the anyway. Scott Brown. Well, we spoke about it in Friday, didn't we, Laura? About Scott Brown, and there was a difference of opinion. I said that he still had a role to play because he was a big character and a big voice in that dressing room. And if he can help the likes of Turnbull improve on his game, then I think it's worthwhile keeping Scott Brown around, to be honest, and let him maybe have a crack at coaching badges to see if he can develop. Because he's been leading that huddle for so long, and he's been an inspiring figure, and he's a winner. So I think he still has a vital contribution to make. And if you want him to play the odd game, fine, but stress to him that he'll play a bit part in the playing side to concentrate on a coaching role and be a motivational factor for Celtic for next season to see if they can mount a title challenge.
Well, I would hope that we are going to be mounting a title challenge, Tony. I just think back to some times in my Celtic supporting life where we've lost a lot of experience all at the same time. 3 or 4 guys leaving all at the same time. And I find that quite dangerous. And I look at the kind of the spine of that Celtic side being the experience of the likes of Forrest and McGregor and Brown. And I think it's important that we keep a hold of these guys at least for another season. But then perhaps Scott Brown will take a step into the coaching set up after that.
We lost Lustig. I think Lustig was a vital cog in that machine, and I would have kept him around just for the motivational factor and to G players up and his experience. I mean, there was a win. How many medals did Lustig win itself?
He was an invincible twice in his career, wasn't he? Because he was an invincible before he came to Celtic. Yeah.
So guys like that have an important role to play moving forward. They really do.
I think so.
The mentality back into the club.
The mentality, yeah, because again, we've spoken a lot this season about culture, and I think culture comes from obviously the grassroots and from within, and when a new player comes into the club, they have to embed themselves in the culture that already exists. I think that's why I was really annoyed at the comments that Frimpong made last week when he was talking about, it's normal, we didn't win the league, that's normal. Well, it isn't normal. And it's not been normal for some time. So it's all about the culture, and I think it's key to have somebody like Scott Brown in that dressing room, especially with the rebuild coming around as well. Laura, what was your thoughts on David Turnbull?
I think his comments were kind of one thing that kind of stood out to me was Scott Brown's having banter with me, and like we all know what Scott Brown's like. I'm sure that's a big part of his building relationships, but it does concern me a little bit about whether, I voiced my opinion on Scott Brown on Friday, saying that I was of the opinion that maybe we need a clean break from him for a while. He needs to go away and get experience elsewhere, because my suspicion is, and David Turnbull's comments there kind of back up to me, that maybe he's getting a bit too comfortable, maybe he's a bit of a big fish in a small pond now, and maybe he needs to spread his wings a little bit and do a bit of learning elsewhere. I'm not saying that there's not a role for him at the club in the future. I'm sure there is. You don't get rid of a guy who's done as much as he's done in the last decades or even longer than that without thinking he'll be back in some capacity in the future. But yeah, I would prefer, especially after the way things have collapsed this season, that we get a clean break from some of these players. And as far as for him having another year with a playing contract, I think that's even more out of the question. I think if you have question marks over whether he's contributed to the attitude of the team this season, I certainly think you could have more question marks over what he's actually contributed on the pitch. So for me, it's a no. But as I say, we're a varied and wide-opinioned church on Axom, and I think that's what's good about it.
Oh, absolutely. And I would like to hear JP's opinion on this as well. You get so accustomed to Scott Brown being that leader, don't you, JP? The successful leader that he has been for a number of years at Celtic.
Yeah, I love him, and to be honest, I don't want his final season to be associated with what it's going to be associated with. We all know what's coming, but the idea of Scott Brown leaving like this doesn't sit well with me, and I wouldn't want to get to a stage next season, a couple of months in, where we're having a conversation on here going, we should have probably kept Scott Brown, shouldn't we? And like if he's to go, that is, but so yeah, I guess it depends on what Scott Brown wants to do. If he sees himself as playing a full season as a first team starter, then it's not going to be at Celtic, and it can't be at Celtic, and that's no disrespect to him, but if he wants to go and try something else, then that's up to him, and we can't exactly persuade him to stay and just sort of hang around and be this guy in the dressing room that gives a second team talk after the manager. That's not really what I don't really think that's really what Scott Brown would want to do.
See, the big thing for me, JP, all season we've spoken about change. We have been pushing for change on this bulletin, and I think that's why the inclusion of Axom on Friday was kind of pivotal on a personal note, because we've been asking for that level of engagement. But two of the big things we were talking about was a change in direction in relation to the CEO and also a change in the manager, and both of these things have happened. But on the flip side of that, I would look at the departure of Scott Brown being three massive figures leaving Celtic Park, all in a very short space of time. And it does concern me. Like Tony said, we had that example fairly recently where we had players, Tony, like Lustig and Craig Gordon, all leaving around about the same time, or within a matter of months of each other, or within a season. And I think it is a tough one, especially when you look at the turnover in personnel in the summer there, with 6 new guys coming in, trying to bed them into that whole mentality and culture of the club. That's worrying me. And by the same token, I get what Laura's saying in relation to having that figure. How much has he contributed this season to the poor performances? A lot of people think we're a better side without him in it. There's been a lot of talk about Sorrow. He's been benched. He's on the bench again today, of course. But we were also given the opportunity to speak to John Kennedy, and I had loads of questions to ask John Kennedy, but as I say, you're 6th or 7th in line, so you've got to kind of bide your time and tick the questions off as they come along. I've been concerned a wee bit about obviously how things are going to change in the transfer market as a result of COVID and Brexit, and I asked John Kennedy. Paul John Dykes from a Celtic State of Mind here. Conor Hazard has recently signed a new deal at the club. How important will the development of Celtic's graduates be as we move into a post-COVID, post-Brexit football landscape?
Yeah, it's important, always is. And even now, with the way the landscape is, with Brexit, COVID, everything else, then we've got to maximise what we have in-house as well. Conor's one who, you'll have seen yourself several times this season, who's one who's been around the first team for long enough now. And to be honest, he earned his opportunity to play through his training and how he was progressing. And as I say, the opportunity is good for young players to show themselves. Now, there's areas of Conor's game when he did well, and he'll be the first to admit there's areas of the game, especially in certain games where he has to be better. And for a young player, especially a goalkeeper, where making a mistake's very much highlighted, is dealing with not just the talent he's got, but it's pressure situations. So how do you deal with a setback? Looking at Conor's game, very talented player, goalkeeper who, we hope has a very bright future here. For him, again, psychologically, okay, you make a bad decision, you make a mistake, what next? Things I've seen with Conor is very much that it hangs over him for too long. One bad decision can become two, as minor as it might be. So again, it's how you address that, and just resetting. Knowing you made a mistake, accept that, acknowledge it, but again, reflecting on, okay, what makes a good performance for me, and get back on that. So for Conor, he's a good player, one we have high hopes for. Delighted he's committed for the next couple of years, and hopefully continue to progress the way we want him to.
As I say, it's taken us 3.5, almost 4 years to get into a Celtic presser, as they call it. And I was impressed with John Kennedy, so I felt it was necessary to actually put that out, because you've got to be as balanced as possible. But as soon as I put it out, people were saying, 1 minute you want him out of the club, now you're impressed with him. I didn't mean as a coach. I just thought the way he put himself across, he spent a lot of time with every single query, every single question that was put to him. He spent a lot of time, and I felt that he was very impressive in his delivery, and I'm pretty sure he will have a future at Celtic. But what did you make, Tony, of his response in relation to, our transfer market dealings moving forward and the development of youth? He kind of skimmed over that and focused on Conor, who, by the way, he's dropped from the squad today.
You put the Axom jinx on Conor.
I know.
Well, we didn't really deal with your second part of your question, did he? We spoke off air, Laura, yourself and I, and he addressed the Conor Hazard situation, but didn't really deal with your second part of the question, which, as you say, he came across very impressively. You would have liked to have heard him expand on that. And he did say it was important moving forward, but we all know that it's important moving forward. And he seems to seems to like Connor. He's worked with Connor, clearly, hasn't he? So, but we know the importance of rearing our own talent. But the problem with rearing your own talent is we don't want to rear them for other teams to come in and pluck them just when they're about to, maybe make their breakthrough into the first team. And we've watched that happen with increased regularity in the past couple of seasons. And the clubs that are coming are big clubs. Why should Celtic do all the groundwork and then clubs like Bayern Munich, Man City, Liverpool or whoever reap the rewards? Celtic have to stop that. So they have to find a way of obviously rearing the young talent and giving them a pathway to the first team and making sure they play for Celtic before they play for anybody else or sign for anybody else. That's the big concern here.
A lot of other questions were asked in relation to what Kennedy had learned from previous managers, including, of course, Neil Lennon, Brendan Rodgers, Ronnie Deila. He spoke in glowing terms about Brendan Rodgers, saying that they are still in regular contact. Hopefully that's not about Odsonne Edouard, who he also said wouldn't be leaving on the cheap. JP, were you impressed with John Kennedy, the way he put himself across there?
Yeah, I was, and I've been reading a lot of people saying, I think it's terrible how much abuse John Kennedy's been getting. I don't really know if it's abuse. I think people were just annoyed at the fact that he's part of this structure that has been foisted upon a run of managers. And I know you could say, he was foisted upon Brendan Rodgers. But was that Brendan Rodgers' choice? Was he given that choice? What was the situation with when Neil Lennon was appointed? Was there any chat at all about Neil Lennon being able to bring in any of his own staff, which ultimately I think would have helped him? And that's not me waving the Lennon flag. I'm just saying it's a fact of life. If you are working with people that you have a bond with, and I know that they played together, probably briefly, but it's just, I'm not on the Kennedy bus. There's people were texting me going, that's Kennedy going to get the job now after that one day press conference, and I was like, surely not. No.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, the big thing for me, JP, try to be as balanced as possible. I mean, if I was to come away having enjoyed a near 1 hour discussion with the interim manager and just said, Kennedy this, Kennedy that, we've been shouting for fan engagement all season. They give us it. You're impressed with the guy that actually engages with you, and you've got to be as balanced as possible when you put that out there. He doesn't get my vote as the new Celtic manager. He could go on a run of games, delaying the title being wrapped up. He could win the Scottish Cup. And by the way, I still think we need a change of manager. I don't think he would be the man for the job, even if he was to go on that unbeaten run. Laura, where do you sit with John Kennedy?
I see a lot of what JP's saying and agree with it. I think it's... I think he definitely speaks well, and there's a lot to be said for that. You would hope that translates on the training pitch and that he's able to get some of his ideas across in the same kind of way. I don't think, like we've said already, that there's any basis on which he can say he deserves the job off the back of one press conference where he's able to answer, a lot of really good questions, but ultimately not too difficult questions for him to answer. I think the minimum you expect is a manager or a representative of the club to be able to handle themselves properly in the media, and that's exactly what he did. I wouldn't be against him staying in some capacity going forward. I'm not for this kind of get him out along with the rest, because I think there's got to be some continuity there. That flies in the face of what I said about Scott Brown, but there we go. I think probably what we need, though, is that he doesn't have such a prominent role in the coaching in terms of being the assistant manager. There's certainly a role for him within the club, whether it's in youth development or taking on more of a recruitment role or something like that, but not, in my opinion, being so directly involved with the first team, because as we've seen this season, it hasn't worked to any great effect, and I doubt that it would work any better or worse with a new manager. I think a new manager coming has to have their own people around him.
No, I would agree with that. Now, John Kennedy's second game in interim charge of Celtic. He's tinkered very, very slightly with the team. And out goes Patrick Klimala. We've got 3 strikers on the bench, and we start with one recognised striker alongside El Yunusi. I'll come to yourself first, Tony Haggerty. What do you make of the lineup? Couple of changes on the bench. The return of James Forrest.
Yeah, I mean that's a welcome return to see that. I mean, obviously we've missed him, but I mean, Jim touched upon it last week when he said he hoped that Kennedy would make his own stamp on the Aberdeen game, but it was a kind of same old. And for lots of last week, Celtic were Doc Cotton. You know what I mean? Let's be honest, they really were. They weren't inspiring at all. So he's tinkered a wee bit this week, but I'm looking at that team and I'm asterisk 5 players. 5 players in that team are going to be here next season. Well, possibly Bain, Brown, Turnbull, McGregor and Welsh. So 6 of that team are for the off. By the looks of it, Kenny, Christie, Edward, Elyounoussi, Ayer, Laxalt. You would figure, wouldn't you?
It's quite concerning, isn't it?
That to me leapt out at me right away. Mm-hmm. You know, Laura mentioned a word there, continuity. There's certainly this is short-term planning. This is a team that are going to be set up to try and shatter Rangers' invincible league season if they can, and have a tilt at the Scottish Cup if they can. But as we spoke about on Friday, only a fool would put money on Celtic winning the Scottish Cup, because that's a change from last week's team. Next week or the week after for the Rangers game, is he going to change it again? So there doesn't seem to be any even planning going on there. You know, it's just short-termism or game by game. And, so I'm no. It doesn't fill me with any great optimism or hope moving forward.
It's interesting the amount of players that could leave in the summer. I mean, the level and the magnitude of this rebuild is absolutely massive. You think Scott Brown's contract's up? I think June, July, is it normally at the end of June? You've got 4 loanees returning to their parent clubs, I would guess. I think there might be some interest in Elyounoussi, or perhaps not, depending on who the new manager is. And then you've got another 4 players whose contracts are up a year in June. So you've got Ayer, Christie, Edouard and Lee Griffiths. This list of 9 players from that potential 19 that are out there today could all be gone. It's a huge rebuild, and again it goes back to the Scott Brown thing, I guess, Laura, whereby it is that continuity that I think maybe it's a comfort. You need to have that regularity of the captain being there for the amount of new faces that are going to come into Celtic. I would also think maybe even Tommy Rogic would be on his way out as well. I don't think he's contributed enough to be around next season. When you're looking at that team, Laura, what are your thoughts? Are you disappointed that we're not playing with 2 recognised strikers, first and foremost?
I would say so. I think it was Totty 10 in the comments saying stop going on about 2 strikers up front. Most top teams play 1 striker with 2 narrow forwards. That's fair enough, but we don't always play with 2 narrow forwards either. We end up with 1 striker and then like 3 number 10s who all get in each other's way, and it just doesn't really work. But as far as the kind of mass exodus to expect at the end of the season, it is concerning, not even so much from the point of view of the players that we're losing, but you're going to have to replace them, and there's no guarantee that, especially with Champions League qualifiers happening so early in the summer, that you're going to have a chance to gel any new recruits that come in. You're potentially going to have a situation where over half of your first 11 are players that haven't played together before, and that with a manager who's not bedded in at the club either. So that's all a bit of a recipe for disaster. But having read the French football news, it looks like Ncham's going to be heading back to us, so we'll be alright. We'll have Ncham back and we'll be sorted.
Well, I'd kind of resign myself to Ncham going. I still think he will. He's a player like Rogic for me, and in many ways like Elyounoussi as well. He just lacks that consistency, JP, and I just think this season, when you've had 2 or 3 people of that ilk, along with new signings coming in, you've got half a team that are not performing.
Yeah, I'm definitely not on a bus for Ncham coming back, because he's gone. He's wanted to go for a long time, and he's got his move. And if it doesn't work out at Marseille, then it's unfortunate for him, but it's certainly not going to work out at Celtic. Just with regards to the team selection today, I said last week that I was more interested in what John Kennedy's team would be today rather than last week, because he would be able to see what happened last week and then make adjustments for this week. And for all the optimism of last week and the supposed zip being back in the first half and everything, which I saw a little bit of but not much, he's gone and changed it again today. Klimala on the bench, so he's not stuck with Klimala. He hung his hat in his first game in charge on Patrick Klimala up front, and then the second game he's gone, oh, actually no. So, straight away there's like question marks getting flung up in the air about his decision making and everything else, because that was his first Celtic team last week, and you'd think you'd want to be absolutely 100%, 200% sure that is the team that's going to do the business for you. And then, they got the result, but they didn't perform well. So then he's changed it again this week. So I'm not. It doesn't fill me with much confidence today, to be honest.
It's been a feature all season, that chopping and changing of the team. I think when I look at this, one of the big questions around the personnel would be, is Barkas or Ajeti or both of them going to be a part of the rebuild, or are we going to cut our losses on those two expensive signings? And the only way that we can find that out is by playing them. Actually getting them in the team and having a look at them for 10, maybe even a dozen games, depending on how the Scottish Cup goes. But Barkas obviously has been reintroduced to the bench, yet he's still sitting on the bench. I find that a little bit, again, going back to what Anthony said earlier, a wee bit short-term planning. Anthony, I mean, can we salvage anything out of the 10 million investment in Barkas and Ajeti?
Well, you'll never know, because you say they've got to play. But I think there's a player hidden in Ajeti somewhere. Barkas has just had a nightmare, so you got to make a decision in Barkas. Do you give him games to show what he can do, or do you cut your losses and say, time we look for a new club? But, Kennedy's been there all season. He's watched these guys. That's what concerns me. I keep going back to it. You've watched them in training. You must have some idea what they can or what they cannot do. And people are getting on as they're saying, oh, it's not a Kennedy loving. People know my thoughts on Kennedy. This isn't an 8, 10, 12 game on the job interview. I don't want him there. I don't want him in the manager's chair. I said it straight away, and I was, derided for the comment that I made. If he's a world-class coach, that he's kept it well hidden. Right, so fine, that was just a one-liner, a throwaway line, but I don't want him to be the next Celtic manager, but I wish him well when he's in the position just now. But for me and a lot of Celtic supporters, he'll be tainted by this year's failure. He's part of that setup. So you now have to make a decision with John Kennedy come the summer. Personally, I think he should go and earn his stripes somewhere else, and if he is going to be the manager, then he might come back in the future at some point. But I don't think he's got a role to play in any new managerial setup coming into Celtic. People might disagree. He might get sent to be charged of the youth academy, something like that. Then fine. If he has got ability, then let him prove it there. But I would ship John Kennedy out because he's been there far too long, and he's part of the problem, part of the malaise at the club, in my opinion. And I'm not being harsh on John Kennedy, but that's just the way I see it. And sorry, on you go.
I was just going to say that he was apparently a front runner for the Hibs job, Tony. When Jack Ross got the job at Hibs. So I think that if he does decide to go, or if the club decide that it's time for him to go, there will be opportunities for John Kennedy. Yeah,
because people keep telling you how good a coach he is. Great. I just think that it's not what Celtic need at this moment in time. Celtic need a big hitter to come in and take us on another Brendan Rodgers type journey. That's the level of ambition that Celtic have to have this summer, or right now, because there's 100 and odd days to the Champions League qualifiers. And you just implore the board to get this sorted ASAP.
Absolutely. Now the players are on the park. Before we go to the action, Tony, give me a prediction for today's game.
3-1. They're up roaring. You know the rest.
Laura Bradburn.
I'll go slightly more conservative. I'll say 2-1. 2-1
to Celtic. And JP?
Oh God. I've got a really bad feeling about the day, but I'll be optimistic and say 1-0. Probably in the second half, a substitute.
You know this, JP, you were talking last week about the last time we were at Tannadice. I'm looking at the forward line there at Dundee United. There's certainly goals in it. I'm impressed with Liam Smith at the back. He's a full-back who used to play five-a-sides with us in Dalgety Bay, and he's a Celtic fan, so a big shout-out for Liam. But I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking back to a game where we went up to Tannadice, we won 3-1. I can't remember all three goal scorers, but Willie Faulkner scored a header and then injured his knee celebrating, and Carl Muggleton was in goals, and we won 3-1 that day. And for some some reason that's just popped into my mind. So I'm going to go 3-1 Celtic. They'll get a goal, but we'll win 3-1. Let's go to the action, and I'll catch up with you guys at half time. Thanks for tuning in to A Celtic State of Mind.